Hey guys, welcome to All Things English. It's been a while. Today's lesson is all about the phrasal verb. Yep, it's that tricky 2-3 word combination that you'll often hear coming out of a native speaker's mouth, but most often won't really understand because it has a figurative or an idiomatic meaning. So, why don't we start off this lesson by checking out the definition of a phrasal verb. So, what is a phrasal verb? A phrasal verb is a phrase that combines a verb with an adverb, or a verb with a preposition, or both. And this phrase functions like a single verb, whose meaning is different from the combined meaning of the individual words that make it up. For example, the phrasal verb look up doesn't literally mean to direct your eyes upward or above you, but instead, it means to search for, as in an item of information, let's say in a reference book or online. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. So in this table, we have the verb look and 3 phrasal verbs that all happen to begin with the word look. To look at something means to direct one's gaze towards someone or something, or in a specified direction. For example, there's a wise saying that goes, always look before you leap. And I can tell you right now to please look at the table while I continue explaining. Okay, now let's take a look at the 3 phrasal verbs we have here. First, we have look up. As I mentioned earlier, this means to search for and find information in a reference book or online. Next, we have look after. To look after someone or to look after something means to take care of that someone or something. So a good example would be to say, please look after my dog while I'm on vacation. And lastly, we have look forward to, which means to anticipate something with much pleasure. For example, Bob is really looking forward to his vacation that we often find him daydreaming at work. As you can see, all the phrasal verbs here function like single verbs with a single meaning. So you should treat each phrasal verb as such, like a single verb. Okay, an important thing that I want you to remember is that the meaning of a phrasal verb as a whole is usually unrelated to the individual meanings of the words that comprise it. So think of a phrasal verb as an entirely new and independent word. And this is what differentiates it from other multi-word verbs like the prepositional verb. Okay, so for example, let's take a look at the phrasal verb check out. The verb check, or to check, simply means to make certain that something or someone is correct, safe, or suitable by examining it, him or her, quickly. For example, ever since my neighbor got robbed, I've made it a habit to check if my front door is locked whenever I leave my apartment. Another example, to help keep travelers safe, airports use security scanners to check for items that aren't approved for air travel. Next word here is the adverb out. Out is used to show movement away from the inside of a place or container. Take a look at these examples. She opened the window and stuck her head out for some fresh air. As soon as he smelled the aroma of brewed coffee, he jumped out of bed. Now let's take a look at the meaning of the 2 words combined as the phrasal verb check out. As a phrasal verb, check out means to look at or take notice of someone or something. Take a look at these examples, for instance.
Phoebes, check it out, check it out, check it out, check it out.
Oh, Soap Opera Digest!
I'm glad you're here. Check it out.
Isn't it the coolest?
Oh, hi there!
Hey, check it out.
Is that Abe Simpson? Geez, man, we haven't seen you since Woodstock.
Now that you know the meaning of this phrasal verb, I can tell you, if at this moment you think you're learning something useful from this video and you find value in it, then you should check out the other videos on this channel. Wink, wink. Okay, so as you can clearly see, the meaning of the individual words check and out have absolutely no bearing on the meaning of the two words combined as the phrasal verb check out. And if this isn't tricky enough, some phrasal verbs, like this one, can have more than one meaning. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. When I mention the phrase check out, for most of my students, the first thing that comes to mind is the procedure followed when a guest leaves a hotel at the end of a stay. In other words, when you settle your hotel bill before leaving, when you check out. For others, it's paying for their groceries at the checkout counter at their local supermarket. Then, of course, there's the second most popular meaning for checkout, and it means to look at someone because he or she is physically attractive.
Oh, check out that super fox!
Phrasal verbs can be divided into four main types based on how they behave when used in sentences. First, we have transitive and intransitive phrasal verbs. A transitive verb is one that only makes sense if it exerts its action on an object. On the other hand, an intransitive verb will make sense without one. Let's take a look at some examples of transitive phrasal verbs. Put off, which means to postpone. And our example sentence here is, we'll have to put off the meeting. As you can see, put off only makes sense because it exerts itself on an object, which in this case is a meeting. If we remove that object from the sentence, then it won't make sense at all. So we can't say, we'll have to put off. This is an incomplete sentence and doesn't make sense. All right, next up, we have turn down, which means to refuse or reject. The example here reads, she turned down his offer. Once again, you can see that this phrasal verb only makes sense because it exerts itself on an object, which in this sentence is his offer. We can't just say she turned down because once again it's incomplete and therefore it doesn't make any sense at all. Now let's take a look at some intransitive phrasal verbs, starting with get up. To get up simply means to rise from bed. The example here reads, you need to get up. You might be late for school. As you can see, this sentence is a complete sentence because the phrasal verb get up is intransitive and doesn't need a direct object to make sense. Next we have break down. To break down means to stop working or functioning. For example, his car broke down. Once again, it's plain to see that this is a complete sentence, and the phrasal verb break down doesn't need to exert itself on an object to make any sense. The next two types of phrasal verbs are the separable ones and the inseparable ones. For example, let's take the phrasal verb put on. We can say, put on your jacket. And we can also say, put your jacket on. Both sentences are grammatically correct and have the same meaning. Then we have inseparable phrasal verbs like check on. We can say, I'm going to check on the kids. They might be hungry. But we can't say, I'm going to check the kids on. This doesn't make any sense. Here are some examples of separable phrasal verbs. She turned down his offer. But we can also say, she turned his offer down. We'll have to put off the meeting. And we can also say, we'll have to put the meeting off. Here are some examples of inseparable phrasal verbs. She checked on the kids. She checked the kids on. No, it doesn't make any sense, so you can't separate this phrasal verb. He bumped into his ex the other day. He bumped his ex into the other day. Once again, this sentence doesn't make sense because you can't separate this phrasal verb. Now, unfortunately, there is no general rule that determines which phrasal verbs can and can't be separated. So you'll find out which phrasal verbs can be split apart as you learn them and experiment with them. For a lot of ESL learners, phrasal verbs can be difficult to use and understand. So here are some general rules and key points to remember. First, phrasal verbs have a figurative or idiomatic meaning that's different from the words that make it up, okay? This is how you can differentiate a phrasal verb from other multi-word verbs like a prepositional verb. Take these sentences, for example. He listens to music all day. She was brought up by her grandmother. Okay, now, which of these examples has a phrasal verb? That's right, it's this one. And why? Because the multi-word verb in this sentence, brought up, has an idiomatic meaning, and that makes it a phrasal verb. Because brought up actually means raised, so you can say she was raised by her grandmother, not her parents. While the first sentence, the multi-word verb is listens to, and to listen to means to listen to. So it has a literal meaning, and this is actually an example of a prepositional verb. Next up, we have word order. Now, word order comes into the picture mainly when you're attempting to split up the phrasal verb. So always bear in mind that intransitive phrasal verbs are inseparable, meaning the verb and the particle must always be next to each other in order to make sense. But with separable phrasal verbs, it's different. They're transitive and always have a direct object to complete them. You can separate the phrasal verb by putting the direct object in between the verb and the adverb. So for example, let's take the sentence, they turned down my offer. You can separate this phrasal verb by taking the direct object, my offer, and putting it in between the verb and the adverb. For example, they turned my offer down. However, if the direct object is a pronoun, then we have no choice. We must separate the two parts of the verb and insert the pronoun. So we can say, they turned it down. But we can't say, they turned down it. This is wrong and doesn't make sense. Next up, we have conjugation. For this, all you have to remember is that phrasal verbs are still verbs and therefore follow the same rules of conjugation. When the phrasal verb is used as a main verb, you have to conjugate the verb alone according to the respective tense and not change the preposition in the phrasal verb. For example, she turned up the radio when she heard the song. I hung out with my coworkers last night. We dropped by yesterday, but you weren't home. As you can see with these examples, the verbs turned, hung, and dropped have been conjugated in the simple past form, whereas the prepositions up, out, and by remain the same. And finally, when it comes to three-part phrasal verbs, which are also called phrasal prepositional verbs, by the way, the rule is that they're always inseparable. And this is because they're prepositional verbs. Okay guys, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Of course, more importantly, I hope you learned something new. Feel free to subscribe if you found value in this lesson. And click that like button if you enjoyed this particular lesson. Yeah, that's it for now. Have a nice day. See you guys next time.